You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.
All right, Jimmy Ott, Paul Stone talking college football this week. And let's get to the big one, top 5 matchup we've been looking at for quite some time. Won't be the prime time game. This will be right at the beginning. Noon Eastern kickoff in Happy Valley. Ohio State, number 4 in the country, comes in to number 3 and undefeated Penn State. Big story here is Penn State's starting quarterback, Drew Allaire, who has shown some progress from last year to this year, showed some development. He goes down with a left knee injury late in the first half in Madison against Wisconsin. They're down 10-7 at half. He would be unable to return. And then Bo Pribula starts the second half, 11 of 13, a TD, 98 yards. He also rushes it 6 times for 28 yards. But, man, if you're going to put him in, you got a little bit of seasoning there on the road, conference game, down, and led him to a comeback. The Penn State defense also added a pick 6 to pull away from Wisconsin in a tough look-ahead spot. We know about Ohio State, how they struggled in their look-ahead spot. Nebraska giving them all they could handle in Columbus. Down in the fourth quarter, Ohio State comes back to stay in the top 5. 3.5 and 46.5 the number. Road favorite here for the Buckeyes against Penn State, Paul.
Yeah, I tell you, I think Saturday's early Big Ten showdown going to start at 11 a.m. Central. I think it shapes up as a low-scoring, Jimmy, in my opinion. You know, first of all, you mentioned the status of Penn State quarterback Drew Allaire. Didn't play in the second half of Saturday's 28-13 victory at Wisconsin after suffering that apparent left knee injury. Penn State head coach James Franklin said Monday that Allaire's availability might come down to a game-time decision. My gut instinct is that Allaire won't play. He'll need at least a week to recover. And if Allaire cannot go, sophomore backup Pribula would be the starting quarterback. To this point, before last week, entering the game in the second half at Wisconsin, he'd been more of a runner, kind of a gadget player for the Nittany Lions, but he did throw the ball quite well against the Badgers. So they might not have to scale that offense back all that much. But, some things would be taken off the table. Obviously, Allaire, as you mentioned, has developed this year in his sophomore season, much more of a quarterback threat in the downfield passing game, still protecting the ball quite well, talking about Allaire. So there would be some drop-off there. There would be some things, again, I think, taken off the table. I think it's important to note that last year, with a healthy Drew Allaire in Columbus, the Nittany Lions only managed 240 yards of offense. They only averaged 3.5 yards per play with a healthy Drew Allaire. Last year, Ohio State once again has one of the nation's top defenses, only give up 11.9 points per game and rank in the top 10 defensively in almost every key defensive team statistical category. Ohio State, on the other hand, they have some offensive injury concerns of their own, and they mostly center on the offensive line, primarily at the left tackle position. They had already lost their starting left tackle, Josh Simmons, who was a second-year starter at left tackle, to a season-ending injury. And then this past week against Nebraska, his replacement, Zen Mikowski, he's injured, lost for the year apparently. Now they're going to have to shuffle that offensive line around. Sometimes that can be a little dicey. They moved their right guard, I believe, Donovan Jackson, to left tackle. He'll probably start there, but there's going to be some shuffling. There's going to be some new guys playing. That's difficult against a defense of Penn State's caliber. Last week, talking about offensive performance, the Buckeyes only 285 yards offense in that narrow escape against Nebraska at home. Penn State's defense even tougher than Nebraska's. A formula that I use projects only 120 plays in this game, so I think it's going to be a slow pace. I like the under 46.5 Saturday there at Happy Valley State College.
Yeah, I like your total last week that went way over in Tulane in North Texas. I like your total again this year for everything that you said. And so, especially with a young quarterback, they may take less risk with him as well. My side on this one is simple. These big time matchups, and look, I think Ohio State is the better team. And I thought that Ohio State was the better team even after the game, a little bit better than Oregon. But on the road, it is a different animal. For instance, in the SEC, we've had 5 big-time matchups in big-time venues. Well, 4 of the 5, the home team won. And listen, LSU needed every bit of that home crowd to beat Ole Miss. A&M Saturday needed every bit of that home crowd to beat LSU. Alabama needed every bit of that home crowd to beat Georgia. The only one was the one team that won 2 out of the 3 national championships. They were underdog for the first time in 50 games and won at Texas. I'm just going with the home team here, man. It's college football. It's emotion, and, man, it can swing. It can keep teams in games, and even though it's not going to be at night with the picturesque whiteout, but I'm going to take the points at home in this one. I'll take the Nittany Lions. And look, Prabula he may not be Aller, but similar to Indiana, with the quarterback drop-off, it's not devastating. And I think he has shown that a little bit, that he can do a little bit because they move the ball better in the second half with Prabula than they did with Aller. Doesn't mean that he gives them the best chance. Aller is the starting quarterback. I get that. But I'll take the home crowd. They're going to be jacked up, and this one should be a great one in Happy Valley to get the slate started on Saturday morning. Earn a chance at $10,000 in bonus money with BetRivers Prop Packs. Place NBA same-game parlays to collect player card prop packs and earn rewards. You win based on how your player performs. Log into BetRivers.com or the BetRivers app to place your bet and get your pack at BetRivers right now. Stay in the Big Ten here with another game, and here's an angle in the Minnesota-Illinois game that we look at a lot. And you know what? So far this year, it hasn't been too profitable. Another unranked team went off as a favorite against a ranked team down in Orlando this past weekend. That's the second time that's happened. Both times it's gotten ripped up pretty good against Colorado and also here against BYU. BYU wins handily in that one. But usually when the unranked team, and 95%, not just usually, but the vast majority of when the unranked team is favored over the ranked team, they are at home. Minnesota is unranked on the road, a favorite against Illinois. Minnesota has been playing better ball. They did catch Maryland in a really favorable spot and jumped all over them early. And it won easily, Maryland, after their emotional win against Southern Cal, where they rushed the field, the whole bit. Minnesota's 2.5, 45.5 at Champaign against Illinois. I'm going to take Brett Bielema, where he's had a lot of success, not just in Champaign, but also in Madison, Wisconsin, against the Minnesota Golden Gophers. So, hey, they've been rowing that boat. Look, PJ Fleck's been doing a heck of a job. They're a good team. They're playing well. But this is just a little bit too much to ask on the road in this spot. Give me the points at home with the Illini.
Yeah, Brett Bielema's been very good as the betting underdog in recent years, both at Illinois and prior to that at Wisconsin and Arkansas. Prior to last weekend's 38-9 loss at Oregon, I think Illinois would have been favored in this game over visiting Minnesota, but partially based on that performance in Eugene, but more based on some injury concerns there with the Fighting Illini. They come in as a small underdog, but it's still Illinois or nothing for me. I'm probably going to wait and try to get some more information on player availability, primarily at the wide receiver position. But Illinois getting points at home against, kind of a middling Minnesota team. I have to take a look at the side that you're on as well. Brett Bielema getting the points there with the Illini.
All right, Paul, I want to get to your next pick here, and let's look at the Michigan Wolverines. A tough battle, again, in-state rivalry. Got a little nasty at the end. They improved to 5-3. Now for Michigan this year, 4 different players have attempted passes as Donovan Edwards throws a 23-yard touchdown pass. They have juggled that quarterback position. We know that. No juggling in Eugene. And Dylan Gabriel, as it takes sometimes for these new quarterbacks, sometimes it takes that second year to really get a spike. Starting to get into sync a little bit with his supporting cast in Eugene. 3 straight games now with double-digit yards per attempt. It seems to be flowing a little bit more smoothly. Wasn't always the case earlier for this year. Oregon on the road, a big double-digit favorite here at BetRivers. 14.5, 45.5 at the Big House.
Yeah, first of all, Jimmy, defending national champion Michigan, to put it mildly, they've got some offensive problems. They sorely lack playmakers. You mentioned the musical chairs at quarterback that they've played this season. They've started Davis Warren, Alex Orji, and the now retired Jack Tuttle behind center at different points this season. And in 6 games against Power 4 opponents, they've only averaged 19 points per game. So they're really lacking offensively. But one thing that Michigan continues to do is they still play pretty good defense. And despite not getting much of an assist from an offense that just doesn't keep it off the field enough, the Wolverines only giving up 21.5 points per game, only 4.8 yards per play. Obviously, as you mentioned, Dylan Gabriel, he's upped his game in recent weeks after kind of a choppy start. All started with that big-time performance at home in the victory over Ohio State. They certainly posed the biggest challenge to date to Michigan's defense. The Ducks averaging 36.6 points per game, almost 464 yards per game. So very prolific offensively. But the Wolverines, they hadn't been more than a 2-touchdown underdog since way back in 2014 when they finished the campaign 5-7. Oregon's number 1 for the second straight week. But I view that kind of as more of a target, more of an albatross than an advantage. Michigan's getting 14.5 points at home. I might, regret this pick later, but, funny things can happen in early November. I think Michigan's going to show some pride. They're going to show some fight. Give me Michigan plus 14.5 at the Big House over Oregon.
Players can play same-game parlays on college football and NFL games to earn squares at Bet Rivers. Our exclusive Squares game offers additional chances at profit boost, bonus bets, and many $10,000 jackpots. Visit BetRivers.com or the Bet Rivers app for more details. Let's move on. Another one of your picks, and let's go to another high-profile game. Unexpectedly, how about that Oregon-Michigan? Maybe not the combined ranking at SMU and Pitt. Well, SMU is talk about Clemson and Miami being in the ACC, not playing each other, and they're undefeated. Well, SMU's still undefeated in conference play. Pitt is undefeated overall. And after some scares throughout the season to come back against West Virginia, to come back against Cincinnati on the road in a come-from-behind game, the 34-24 in Chapel Hill, they avoid a late field goal at Cal at home to win 17-15. It was not so tough last Thursday night against Syracuse. Kyle McCord, they jumped all over him, and they cruise to a 41-13 victory. 3 pick sixes along the way. Now they'll travel to Dallas to take on SMU. Sherwood Blunt smiling somewhere. 7-1 the Ponies, and 7.5 and 60.5. Both teams average right at 40 points a game. Should be plenty of points in this one. How about SMU overcoming a 6-turnover game? It was the final piece to my moneyline parlay this past week. Had to overcome 6 turnovers to get it there and then block a short 30-yard field goal attempt at the end of regulation. And then Manny Diaz goes for 2 at the end of the first overtime. It's unsuccessful, and SMU survives. There ain't many of those to lose the turnover battle 6-0, and you still win. But SMU did it. They're still undefeated. Now they host undefeated Pittsburgh. Eli Holstein in a passing attack, Paul.
Yeah, you're mentioning, of course, SMU's victory despite being -6 in the turnover category, 6 turnovers in the victory over Duke. And I heard yesterday, I think SMU's the only one of 2 teams, the other, I believe, being Marshall, that has won a game against an FBS opponent while committing 6 turnovers. So since the turn of the century, 25 years, basically 24 years. And I'm not sure if Marshall was -6 in the turnover battle. Their opponent, I don't know who they beat that day, but they might have been something less than -6. So quite impressive by SMU. But looking at Pittsburgh, like their neighbors to the northeast there in Happy Valley, Pittsburgh has some injury concerns at quarterback with starter Eli Holstein, who was injured on a quarterback run in that 41-13 victory over Syracuse. That injury coming early in the fourth quarter. Yesterday, during his Monday press conference, Pitt head coach Pat Norduzzi obviously was predictably pretty tight-lipped about Holstein's injury and his potential availability on Saturday night there in Dallas. But if Holstein cannot answer the bell, his backup, Nate Yarnell, a junior who has played some football there at Pitt, would be his replacement. In fact, across 3 seasons at Pitt, Yarnell has attempted a total of 102 passes. So he's played some football. He's been on the field, has some experience, but it would certainly be a drop-off from Eli Holstein, who's played very well for the Panthers to this point. You know, you look at those games last week and Saturday's combatants obviously come off clearly different showings in the all-important turnover battle. You mentioned the 5 turnovers by Syracuse in Pittsburgh's victory. 3 of those, as you also mentioned, returned for touchdowns in the first half alone. Incredible, intercepting Kyle McCord 5 times. You know, while Pitt coasted to a victory based largely on that massive turnover advantage, SMU, meanwhile, survived at Duke 28-27, as you mentioned, despite those 6 turnovers, 3 of those coming on interceptions by Kevin Jennings. But I'll look at SMU, first of all, very fortunate. I'll give them a mulligan here. I think they survived a close call. I think they feel that second wind. And I think last week's performance was more of an outlier. Before last week, Kevin Jennings, only 2 interceptions on the season. And prior to last week at Duke, SMU +7 on the year in the turnover category. So I don't think, again, that this is their DNA. I think it's kind of an outlier, so to speak. And while Pitt's undefeated, it hasn't played a single team in Jeff Sagrin's current top 35. I think, with Holstein's uncertainty, I think there's a chance that he doesn't play. If he does play, he'll be at something less than 100%. I like SMU to rebound the Ponies -7.5 over Pitt.
Oh, Holstein can't go. That's going to be a big, big blow for Pitt in this game. Without not knowing a whole lot, he's been the guy for Pitt. There's no doubt about that. So SMU -7.5. They were up 14 in that game before they continued to turn the ball over in that game. So yes, uncharacteristic for the Ponies to all of a sudden it started raining turnovers in Durham, and uncharacteristic for them all season long. Let's go to the Big 12 and another one of those surprise undefeated teams, the Iowa State Cyclones. They're at home in 14.5 against Texas Tech. Texas Tech was atop by themselves with the best record in the Big 12 and conference record. They're 5-3, and they've lost 2 in a row. Lost a close win, a shootout in Fort Worth against TCU. They got blasted at home by Baylor the week before. So they're reeling a little bit. But I think that they're starting, when you get this deep and you get this big of you still have an undefeated, starts to carry a little bit of extra pressure. I think Iowa State will win this game, but that's a lot to ask for, and I think that's just a little bit too big of a number here, laying against a decent team in Texas Tech. We know that Iowa State is coming off of a bye. The last game was, they were down to the very end. They needed 3 out of 3 fourth down conversions to come back and beat Central Florida at Ames. They turned it over one time deep in Golden Knight territory. Had to get a 3 and out and get the ball back again to give back their quarterback. And he did a good job leading them back. He threw for a bunch of yards in that game, and they did win it from comfort behind fashion. But, man, they were really on the ropes there. So, and we know Central Florida is not specific, that strong. So I think that Iowa State, 14.5, just a little bit too much based on their undefeated record here. Give me the Red Raiders plus the points, 14.5 on the road at Ames.
Yeah, we were talking, I think, before coming on air this morning, Jimmy, about just the parity in college football this year. And there's perhaps no more balanced league than the Big 12. It just seems like virtually anyone can beat anybody else on any given night. And this Texas Tech trip to Ames to play Iowa State is certainly no different. As you mentioned, 2 straight defeats by the Red Raiders. You would expect them to, come with all guns a-blazing here. Baron Morton has a little bit of a banged-up right shoulder, throwing shoulder. But Joey McGuire, the head coach, said no structural damage yesterday at his press conference. So hopefully Morton will be good to go underdogs of 4 or more points in the Big 12 this season, 14-8 against the spread. So no play here on my behalf, but certainly in that balanced league, in the Big 12, usually from my perspective, it's the underdog or nothing.
Paul, we talked about that in our Big 12 preview and how balanced and how fun this league would be, but you have to be surprised that it's BYU, Iowa State, and Colorado exceeding expectations, and Kansas, Oklahoma State, and Central Florida, Utah are at the bottom, huh?
I'll tell you, it's just incredible the way it's flip-flopped. I mean, you just again, you wouldn't have seen, especially BYU coming out of nowhere to sit atop the league, and in prime position, they control their own destiny to make the Big 12 championship game and therefore the playoffs. So it's been insane. It's been crazy. For a while, up until a few weeks ago, I think Houston was a pretty easy out, but I don't think the Cougars are even a team you can take for granted at this point. They've inserted Zion Chris, the former Louisiana Lafayette quarterback who transferred to Houston in the offseason. He's replaced Donovan Smith, and he's given that Cougar offense a little bit of a spark. They're more of a defensive team than an offensive team, but he's at least injected some energy into that Houston offense, primarily due to his running capability. But there's just, in that league, you just game in and game out. Anybody can beat anybody, it seems like.
For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott, looking at all the college football. We look at the high-profile games, the ones that everybody's going to be watching that you want to have a little action on, and also with our best bets later on in the week, twice a week right here on the Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.